My dear students and friends, today we'll be discussing about theory of slavery of Aristotle. This will be the third lecture on the series of Aristotle that we have been doing in the past few days. Before we begin, let me introduce a little bit about the theory of slavery of Aristotle. According to Aristotle, the institution of slavery is essential, is natural, and is very much expedient because of certain reasons. He justified the institution of slavery saying that having a slave or owning a slave is not only beneficial for the master but also for the slave himself, because a slave cannot survive alone. He needs somebody who is superior in terms of capabilities or intelligence to look after him. So he defended or he justified the institution of slavery on many grounds. Let us also remember that slavery was very common during the time of Aristotle, and it is quite obvious that he will consider the institution of slavery as natural and necessary. In this very short lecture, we will look at a little bit of introduction, what household or family is all about according to Aristotle, then two assumptions of slavery, two types of slave, and little bit of nature of slave, justification of slavery, and finally criticisms. Now, let's begin with the introduction. For Aristotle, slavery was an institution that is universal and natural. He believed that some men are by nature born to be free, to be master, and others are born to be slaves. Aristotle was against the enslavement of the Greeks, but thought it proper for barbarians who were by nature slaves. In other words, Aristotle thought that a Greek cannot enslave a Greek, but they can enslave barbarian or a non-Greek person as slave, provided they are born to be slave or they are by nature slave. Aristotle discussed the relationship between the master and the slave at length and tried to explain the relevance and use of slavery. Unlike Plato, who ignored the institution of slavery, Aristotle defended the institution both from the point of view of the slave and the master or the householder. Of course, his teacher, Plato, did not talk about slavery, and it is assumed that probably since the institution of slavery was quite universal, he might consider slavery not very important to explain because everybody knows about slave during those days. But his student, that is Aristotle, defended the institution of slavery from many angles. Now, let us try to see what household or family is all about. A family, Aristotle says, consists of husband, wife, children, slaves, and property. Whereas the husband is the head or the master of the family, the rest, that is wife, children, slaves, and property, are property. Property are just part of the household. According to Aristotle, a household or a family involves three types of relationship: that of the master and slave, between the husband and wife, and between the father and the child or children. The master, Aristotle held, rules the slave, the husband rules the wife, and the father rules the children. For Aristotle, man is superior to woman, wiser than the slave, and more experienced than the children. In short, he is simply the head or the boss or the master of the family. Household is important. To have a family, to have a household is important because it fulfills the basic or important functions of an individual, namely the instinct of self-preservation, procreative functions, satisfaction of economic needs, and training of the young ones to be good citizens by inculcating civic and moral virtues. In a family, the key figure is the head of the household. That is the father, who acted as a link between the political community, that is the state, and the family or his household. That means the father, as the head of the family, act as a link between the state and the family. The family is a private sphere, and the political community or the state is a public sphere. So between the public sphere and the private sphere, the father acts as the link. Aristotle remarked, every household is a part of a polis, that is a city-state. Polis means a city-state or simply a state. The society of husband and wife and that of parents and children are part of the household. The goodness of every part must be considered with reference to the goodness of the whole. Let's come to assumptions now. The theory of slavery was based on two assumptions. First, the first assumption is that men are divided in respect of the capacities for virtue, meaning some have higher virtue and deserve to be master, and some have less virtue or no virtue, or less reason or less rationality, and are destined to be slave by nature. In short, there are two types of men: one who are naturally born master, and the other slave. Secondly, the second assumption is that it was possible to determine the category to which an individual belongs. Now, when a person is born, Aristotle argued that it is possible to determine or possible to judge or possible to decide whether that person should be a master or a slave, since he is born or since he is naturally destined to be either a slave or a master. It is not difficult or it is not impossible to determine whether that person should be a master or a slave. He says, a slave is not only a slave of his master but also belongs entirely to him. The master, on the contrary, is a master of the slave and did not belong to him. Types of slave. There are two types of slave. One is conventional and the other is natural. Now, let us look at these two types of slave. Let's begin with the natural one. According to Aristotle, some men are by nature born to be slaves. It is not by training or lack of education or nothing like that, but by nature, some men are born to be slaves. Similarly, some men are born to be masters. A natural slave, according to Aristotle, has enough minds or enough reason or enough rationality to control himself. He is able to control himself. But though he can understand what is good for him or what is profitable for him, he is not able to decide everything by himself. So he needs somebody who has superior mind to tell him what is good for him or to explain to him what he could not understand. So for this, he needs a master to understand and to profit from his own self. So by serving the interests of his master, he can be elevated or he can be educated or he can improve his mental capacity, a benefit he can get which is morally right or morally acceptable. On the other hand, the conventional slaves are not slaves by nature. They have a reason and are qualified to be citizens in their own state. Particularly those barbarians, they have the reason, they have the mental capabilities, or they are well qualified to be a citizen in their own state. But they become a slave after they are taken as prisoners of war. Those who are arrested or those who are caught as prisoners of war can be made as slave in another country, though they have all the necessary qualities to be a citizen in their own state. In other words, there are two types of slave. One is natural, who are born to be slave, and the other is conventional, meaning those who are taken as prisoner of war. Now let's look at nature of slave. Some additional information about Aristotle's view of slave. Aristotle argues that a master-slave relationship, the relationship between a master and a slave, is different from the relationship between a ruler and subjects. Because a slave, unlike a subject of a political ruler, is a tool of the master. He is just a property of the master. A slave is simply a tool or property or just part of the master himself. The slave is not an independent living being, but he is just part of the household of the master. However, since he is a human being, though a slave, since he is a living creature with certain mental capabilities or certain reasoning capacities, a slave could become his master's friend. He can be a friend of a master. A master can treat his slave as his own friend, and he can also be emancipated as a reward if he is giving good service to his master. If he is doing his duty properly, if he satisfies his master, then he can get emancipation with the help of his own masters. So once he is emancipated, slave should not be sold. He cannot be sold, but he should be freed as a freeman. With the help of his master, if he develop all the mental capabilities, all the rational capabilities or reasoning power, and if he is able to reach the stage of a master, then he can be free. He can be set free by his master. In no cases, a slave should be sold. According to Aristotle again, the institution of slavery is not permanent. Though the institution of slavery was quite universal or prevalent or common during his times, he knows that the institution was not permanent. One day, with the development of science and technology, or with the advancement of human knowledge, the institution of slavery will go away. Aristotle, in the previous slide, we have seen that talks about two types of slave, natural and conventional. But Aristotle says that a defeated enemy or a person who is taken as prisoner of war should not be made as slave simply because they are defeated in the war. They can be made as slave only if there is an indication that the one who captured them are superior in terms of intelligence. They are more intelligent, they are more wise, or they have the better mental capabilities. Only then a prisoner of war can be made a slave. Otherwise, those defeated enemy or those prisoners of war should not be made as slaves simply because they are defeated. As we have just discussed, slaves should be given human treatment. They should be treated well, and he also considered, freedom should also be considered to them if they desire, or if they get required criteria or qualities to become a free man. Now let's come to justifications of slavery. The first point of justification of slavery is that slavery is natural. Aristotle was one of the first philosophers to justify the institutions of slavery, which in fact was the order of the day. It was so common, but Aristotle was able to defend the institution of slavery. He thought that slavery was a natural thing and that human beings come in two types, slave and non-slaves, or slaves and masters. Some people, he said, was born a natural slaves and ought to be slaves under any circumstances. Other people were born to rule these slaves, could use these slaves as they please, and could treat them as property. Now, there are two types of person, one group born to be slave and another born to be non-slave or masters. These masters can use the other group as their slaves, and they can use them as they please or as they want, and they could treat them as like their own property. Natural slaves were slaves because their souls were not complete. They lack certain qualities such as the ability to think properly. They are not able to think properly, and so they needed to have masters to tell them what to do. A natural slave had reason only to the point of recognizing a command and obeying it, whereas the master have all the qualities. A slave or a natural born slave has reason only to the extent of recognizing what the master tell them to do and how to obey the command of the masters. The second point of justification of slavery was that slave is an animate instrument. Aristotle says that there are two types of instruments in a household. One is animate and another is inanimate. And a slave belongs to the animate instrument in a household. And they are intended for action and not for production. They are meant to listen to the master and obey what the master says. In other words, apart from the animate instrument, there are also inanimate instruments in a family. This includes the properties or the non-living materials that the household has. Unlike artisans, a slave did not create a product but only helped in the business of living within the household. The slave Aristotle contains is an animate instrument of property that exists for the sole purpose of facilitating household management. Slaves are essential for performing the myriad variety of mundane tasks that by and large comprise daily living. In short, slave exists in a family to do the myriad variety of tasks that is required in the family on a daily basis. There are many things the master or the householder could not perform because he is involved in the law making or deliberative and administrative matters of the state, and he need leisure time or he need free time to exercise his minds for the welfare of the whole community. So since a master has no time to do all the menial work, it is the duty of the slave to perform all those physical or menial work while the master is involved in statecraft. The third point of justification of slavery is that it is good for the slave. Aristotle thinks that slavery was good for those who were born natural slaves because without their masters, they wouldn't have known how to run their lives. See, being a slave is not only beneficial for the master, but it is also good for the slave because without the master, the slave would not know how to live their own life. The fourth point of justification of slavery is that it is not only necessary but expedient. Aristotle wrote in the Politics, in his most famous book, that for that some should rule and others be ruled is a thing not only necessary but expedient. From the hour of the birth, some are marked out for subjection, others for rule. Now, to have slavery is not only necessary but expedient, in the sense that it is not only necessary but it is practical. It is unavoidable, or one cannot do away with the institutions. It may not be moral to own a slave, but you cannot avoid it because from the point of the master as well as from the point of the slave, to have slavery or to have a slave is not only necessary, not only important, but it is expedient. It is very practical. Again, the fifth point is slave is a living tools. Aristotle thought slaves to be living tools like domestic animals fit only for physical labor. Aristotle wrote, and indeed, the use made of slaves and of tame animals is not very different, for both with the bodies minister the needs of life. Aristotle thinks that a slave is simply a tool in the hands of the master. The only difference with other tools is that slave is a living tool, and the way how a slave and tame animals or domestic animals are used are not different because both of them are used to carry out physical work. So the master can use the slave as he used his domestic animals. The sixth point is rational. In short, the slaves are less rational than the masters. According to Aristotle, slaves were not totally incapable of thought. They are able to think, but they only needed minimal amount of rational ability. They are not able to think complicated things. They are able to think only very little. And that is just enough to understand and carry out their duties. Their rationality is such minimal that it is just enough to understand and carry out their duties or what the master commands them to do. Similarly, slaves were not devoid of virtue. They also have virtue. But once again, they only needed just enough to carry out their duties. Now, in terms of reason and virtue, it is more or less the same with the previous point. Aristotle justified slavery on the grounds of triumph of reason and virtue, the master representing reason and virtue, and the slave representing the absence of reason and non-virtue or less virtue. Now, when it comes to reason and virtue, the master have enough reason and virtue to live the life of a master or to live the life of a ruler. But the slave has very little or no virtue. So on this ground, Aristotle also justified that slavery is not only necessary but expedient. The eighth point is about their abilities and mental faculties. Aristotle believed that men are different from one another in their abilities and mental faculties, and justified slavery for those lacking in these qualities. Now, Aristotle says that men are different in their abilities and in their mental faculties. Some have higher abilities or higher mental faculties, and some have very low mental faculties. So Aristotle justified slavery, saying that for those who have less abilities or who lack in mental faculties, they should be slave by nature. Let us look one more point, that is the ninth point, that is in conformity with the principle of ruling and subordination. In other words, to have a slave is in conformity with the principle of ruling and subordination. Aristotle was categorical that the subordination of the slave must be towards endowing the slave with virtue and not to augment wealth. Otherwise, a slave would lose the one advantage that slavery brought forth, namely the guidance of his life by one of superior virtue. Aristotle says that to own a slave is in conformity with the principle of ruling and subordination. But this subordination of a slave should not be for the purpose of acquiring wealth or riches, but it should be to empower the slave or to endow the slave with virtue. In other words, the master should train the slave to develop his mental faculties, to develop his intelligence, to develop his rational capabilities, and all those necessary to become a freeman. Otherwise, if the master used the slave to gain wealth or to acquire wealth, then one advantage or one reason why the institution of slavery survive will be defeated, because the slave are meant to empower themselves with the help of their master. But if the master did not help them to empower or to emancipate them, then the purpose of slavery, one purpose of slavery, will be meaningless. Now let's come to the criticisms of Aristotle's theory of slavery. First, the classification of individuals on the basis of capacities is wrong, and Aristotle never provided any logical method to be adopted to classify individuals. Aristotle says that there are two types of men, one who are born to be slave and one who are born to be master. He says that it is not impossible or it is not very difficult to determine who is to be a slave and who is to be master. But he did not provide appropriate method or logical method to be adopted to classify individuals. So classification of individuals on the basis of their capacities is simply illogical or wrong. The second criticism is that Aristotle rejected historical origin of slavery and justified it on philosophical rationalization. Now, Aristotle did not talk about when did the institution of slavery started and how long it will continue. Of course, he says that it is not permanent, but he did not bother to discuss when and in which time the institution of slavery started. Instead, he justified the institution of slavery from the point of philosophical rationalization. Of course, philosophically it might look sound, but obviously it is not always rational to think that some people are born to be slaves. The third point is Aristotle's views on slavery reflect his conservatism and primitive outlook towards life. In modern days, slavery has become illegal, immoral, and simply something that we despise. But Aristotle simply thought the institution of slavery to be natural, necessary, and expedient. So this reflects his conservative mentality and primitive outlook. The point number 4 is that the theory of slavery is highly prejudicial and contradictory to the human dignity and niceties of life. It is prejudicial, prejudice, in the sense that it presupposes that Greeks were fit to rule the world and they could not be enslaved even if they were defeated by the barbarians. He being from Greece simply thought that nobody can rule over the Greeks or nobody can enslave the Greeks, but the Greeks can enslave anybody. So just to think that one race or one nationality is superior to the race is simply illogical. Now the fifth point of criticism is that Aristotle doesn't provide any sensible practical method of recognizing natural slaves. And without that, it's inevitable that some people will be made slaves who should not be. Now, Aristotle did not provide any practical method or any sensible logical method to recognize a natural slaves. So it is scared that, or it is being feared that some people who are supposed to be master could be made as slave because of the mistake of those who choose or who determine. Now the sixth point of criticism is Aristotle also had a category of legal slaves, not only natural slaves but conventional slaves or legal slaves. They were not natural slaves but taken as prisoner in war. He argued that if the war was just, the legal slaves would be freed, and if any natural slaves were by chance freed, they should be made slaves. This is something not only contradictory but also confusing, because he says that if the world were just, if there were justice in the whole world, these legal slaves were supposed to be free, and if by chance natural slaves were free, they should be made slaves again. So these kind of statements are a little bit confusing, and critics pointed out that when he is defending conventional or legal slaves, he is also supposing that if the world were just, these slaves would be free. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is the end of our lecture for this topic on the theory of slavery. And in the next lecture, we will look at the theory of citizenship according to Aristotle. The theory of slavery and citizenship is quite interesting. So I hope you enjoy and you learn a little bit. So thank you once again. See you in the next lecture.